This is CBS News Texas.
Hello, everyone, and thank you for joining us. I'm Karen Borta.
And I'm Brittany Rainey. Right now, we are keeping a close eye on Hurricane Milton as it continues to barrel towards Tampa Bay.
We want to take a live look now at new video from hurricane hunters. Now, yesterday, they flew into, this is satellite imagery, but yesterday, the hurricane hunters right here, they flew into the eye of Hurricane Milton when it was a Category 5 storm with winds of 180 miles per hour. You can see them kind of encountering, well, they had a lot of turbulence as they flew into this hurricane. Also, you see a lot of lightning in the pictures there. We want to go now to CBS's Christian Benavides, who is in St. Pete Beach, which is still dealing with the aftermath of Helene.
Orlando residents piled on at this sandlot, filling bags to shore up their homes as Milton barrels toward Florida.
I have very expensive clothes.
78-year-old Suzanne Ferry packed up her car with what personal items she has left. The inside of her home in St. Pete Beach was destroyed in Hurricane Helene, and she barely escaped with her life.
I was sitting on the top of the fridge, across, and the fridge slipped down. Then I fell in the water, then I hold, where the sink was. I tell my son in Vegas, I told him, I'm not gonna make it, I'm gone.
Now this barrier island community is in harm's way once again.
You will die here if you don't move today. You will die tomorrow. You can't survive here.
Milton battered Mexico's Yucatan Peninsula, raining down on the vacation haven. Hurricane hunters experienced heavy turbulence flying into the storm. Forecasters say the so-called dirty side, where winds are the strongest, is expected to fall over Tampa Bay.
Even if it does weaken, you're still looking at a major hurricane.
Florida Governor Ron DeSantis is warning residents the clock is ticking.
Use today as your day to finalize and execute the plan that is going to protect you and your family.
Another concern, debris from Hurricane Helene is still littering the streets in some parts of the state, posing a danger if it becomes airborne or if it's carried off by floodwaters. Drivers filled their tanks at this gas station, a lone structure surrounded by debris fields. The governor is assuring residents there is enough fuel, with more on the way. Christian Benavides, CBS News, St. Pete Beach, Florida.
Now, Brittany, I know that you've been keeping a close eye on this storm. Can you tell us what is the latest?
Well, we are still looking at a Category 4 hurricane. We still have winds up to 150 miles an hour. This is as of the 10 a.m. advisory. We're likely going to see Milton's intensity vary up and down a little bit as we head through the next couple of days as it goes through those eye wall replacement cycles. But it's still going to be a very dangerous storm. I mean, even as it continues to near Tampa, we're looking at a Category 3 hurricane with winds of around 125 miles an hour. And the reason we are expecting it to weaken ever so slightly down to that Category 3 is because it is going to be impacted by dry air and wind shear that's sitting off to the north. And that wind shear actually kind of takes the tops off of those thunderstorms, and it disrupts the energy and the flow of the storm, and it takes a little bit of that intensity away. But it's not going to be enough to really weaken the storm. Even as we head into Thursday morning, we'll likely see a Category 2 storm tracking right across Florida and then heading out into the Atlantic, still likely a hurricane. That's how powerful this system is. So we are keeping an eye on those spaghetti plots as well. They are starting to shift a little bit further south of Tampa, but still Tampa very close, just a couple of miles, but we might see it making landfall closer to Sarasota or Bradenton. And you hear us talk a lot about the right front quadrant or the dirty side of the hurricane. It's really based on the movement. So with Milton, we're seeing it move off to the northeast. So this is the quadrant that's really going to cause a lot of devastation. It's going to continue to push a lot of water up along the coast because you have that onshore flow. This is also where you get the tornadoes associated with it, some very heavy rainfall as well. So this is a side that we really keep a close eye on, but you're definitely going to see impacts with any quadrant of the hurricane. But we could see those winds when it's making landfall around 120 miles an hour. But then you also have to take into effect the storm surge that we're going to see with it as well. Could be up to 15 feet in some areas. But here's a look at those spaghetti plots that I was talking about. Earlier, we were seeing that cluster right over Tampa and a little bit further north. We are starting to see it just ever so slightly down to the south. So that would push that storm surge down to the south just a little bit more, and that would bring even greater impacts to Sarasota and the Bradenton area. But we have storm surge warnings all the way from Cedar Key down towards Fort Myers. That's just the west coast. Notice on the east coast, we also have those storm surge warnings because as Milton is crossing Florida, we're going to see that onshore flow as well right up towards the Detaino Beach area. So they still are going to have storm surge impacts. In the Tampa Bay area, it's very shallow, so it's very susceptible to that flooding. That water really piles up. So we could get some of that surge up to about 9 feet, maybe even 10 to 12 feet. And to just give you an idea, typically a single story building, that's about 8 feet, and we're looking at the potential of 15 feet of storm surge. This is why they're clearing everybody out, because that's not survivable. You definitely run from the water and you hide from the wind. So this is why they're getting everybody off of the coast. So that's just the storm surge. As we saw with Helene, we get a lot of heavy rain associated with these tropical systems. So we're also expecting that water of about 5 to 10 inches just to the north side of the storm, and then even up to 15 inches in some spots. So that's going to lead to localized flooding inland as well. And here's a look at just one model. We are going to continue to see it changing a bit, but I wanted to show you that even tomorrow morning, we're likely going to see some of those rain bands already impacting Florida and the peninsula right around Tampa Bay. As we get into about 4 o'clock on Wednesday, that rain is really starting to pick up along the coast. And then we are expecting that landfall pretty close to 1 to maybe 3 a.m. on Thursday. You can see that eye wall just south of the Tampa Bay area and just north of Fort Myers. But once again, we're likely going to see this shifting ever so slightly as we get closer to landfall. And then it's still an impressive storm by Thursday afternoon as it's headed back out into the Atlantic. So we're already going to start to see some of those winds of 40 miles per hour plus by noon tomorrow. This is why they're trying to get everybody out today, because they're already going to see those impacts tomorrow, and then 60+ mile-an-hour winds by Wednesday evening. And then right at that eye wall is where we're going to see those winds of 75 miles an hour or even up to in excess of 100 miles an hour. So the last time that Tampa actually took a direct hit, that was over 100 years ago, back in 1921. The storm did peak at a Category 4. It had 140 mile-per-hour winds, but at landfall in Tarpon Springs, it was a Category 3. Did actually produce an 11-foot storm surge, so very similar to what we're expecting with Milton, and it had those winds up to 120 miles an hour. And that system did cause 8 deaths, and it actually caused around $120 million in damages. That's if you put it in today's times. So this is a very powerful system. This is why, Karen, we are keeping a close eye on it, because we definitely want everybody to be prepared and getting out of the path of this storm. And it's also continuing to grow in size as we go through those eye wall replacement cycles. You can see it's already expanding. We're starting to get some of that convection closer over to the Tampa Bay area.
There's just something about this storm, and maybe because, you know, just the size and power of it, and the fact that it's heading towards such a congested area. And
high population.
We've been talking because we both have friends and family there. Yeah. Both of us previously worked in the Tampa Bay area. You grew up there. And I've been talking this morning in the last day or so with a dear friend of mine, Lori Conrad. She was a longtime employee here at CBS News Texas. We've got her on the phone right now. Lori, you guys have been just dealing with Hurricane Helene within the last week or so, and now you're facing Milton as well.
Yeah, it's been a tough couple of weeks here, Karen, on the west coast of Florida, especially in our area where we did see substantial storm surge from Helene. You know, it's always surprising to folks when a hurricane hits so far, way up in the Big Bend for us, for Helene, how much we can flood here. You know, Helene was 100 to 150 miles away from us when she passed by, and we had somewhere in the neighborhood of 6 feet of water in our home. So,
and you were saying that this is you guys are on the nature coast, right? So it's not like you guys have the touristy beaches and things like that. And you said that the damage there was a lot more extensive than what they were dealing with in St. Pete and Clearwater. And we saw from one of our earlier stories just how bad it was there.
Yeah, I mean, certainly don't want to minimize what those folks have been through as well on the beaches. My heart goes out to them as well. But like you, I mean, I've seen the reports of, you know, Davis Island and the beaches in Clearwater and St. Pete Beach. And again, horrific. But we had probably 3 times the depth of water where I am, about an hour north of there.
And debris, you guys are still cleaning up from Helene. So I imagine you and your husband, Dean, are going to be evacuating hopefully today?
We plan to evacuate tomorrow, most likely, as we finish up prep. But we're not expecting landfall until the overnight hours tomorrow night. So it's kind of surprising. And now having been through, most recently Helene, it happens pretty quickly. It's surprising. It's not as gradual as you might think. You kind of learn to know when you need to go.
And you guys kind of already got started because you guys have a boat, obviously you have cars, and you wanted to get them out of harm's way yesterday, right?
Yeah. One thing we've learned from a little bit of experience is, even though we might wait to evacuate ourselves a little later, we'd like to work ahead. And so we went ahead and moved a vehicle and our boat yesterday to some friend's property near Ocala, Florida, which is inland and north of here.
And
that was a fun trip, let me tell you, with everyone from Tampa evacuating north on I-75. It took us about 4 hours to travel about 100 miles.
So usually a trip that would take an hour and a half took 4 hours. Right.
And very few stations with gas along the way. Fortunately, we had fueled up before Helene, so we still had full tanks. But, right now, finding a station with gasoline is winning the lottery.
Yeah, and the governor has said that there is plenty of fuel, but maybe just not in the necessary areas where the people are right now, where they're needing to evacuate.
Yeah. I mean, maybe they fueled back up overnight. Maybe they got deliveries overnight. But all I can tell you is, with perhaps 2 exceptions in about a 100-mile trip, we saw almost every gas station with all of their pumps bagged.
Flooding isn't something that we have to deal with here on a regular basis. You mentioned that you guys had 6 feet of water in your house. For those who haven't been in that kind of situation, it's not just like draining a pool when the water goes down. I mean, you've got mud and it just smells so bad. And just everything that was underneath that water line is destroyed, including the walls, right?
Oh, without a doubt, yes. It's hard to describe how truly disgusting it is. And the only closest metaphor I can give you is, if you think about that, if you've been swimming in the ocean and maybe forgot to rinse out your swimsuit, and you find it a couple of days later at the bottom of the hamper, and you're like, oh, wow, that's right. So now picture everything in your house soaked in that, including like your sofa and your mattress and your carpet and your clothes. Picture all of that soaked in that same smell, sitting in the hot Florida sun for a few days, which is what the piles of debris are now, that are just mountains. Everything inside every home has had to be cleared out, including the sheetrock, to your point. So
wow.
It's not fun.
Right. And this is time that you would ordinarily be dealing with the cleanup from that storm. Right. And now you're having to try to, I imagine, shutter and put plywood on the windows and leave because of another storm.
We're shuttered up. Fortunately, we shuttered up before Helene, so we did have that already done, which was nice. But yeah, it's tough. I mean, everyone, when you get in that situation, especially, we just flooded in Adalia a year ago, so everyone just redid their homes in our neighborhood. And, the first thing you want to do is get in there and just start making it right again, just for your own mental health, if nothing else. Plus, people need a place to live. But, we started doing that a couple days after Helene, and we've had to undo most of the stuff we did because now we don't know if it's going to be underwater again.
Oh, Lori, I'm so sorry.
Thank you guys. We can feel your prayers. We can feel Texas's prayers here in Florida, for sure.
Well, we absolutely are praying for you guys, and that you will be thought of consistently for the next several days and beyond. So thank you for taking the time to talk with us, especially because you're preparing to try to get out of there and to save your home. So just know that our prayers are with you, Lori.
Thank you so much, Karen. Thanks, everyone.
All right. Thank you.
I grew up in Tampa as well, so I still have a lot of family there. Luckily, my parents moved here about 1.5 years, 2 years ago, but I still have my aunt there. And I put on this map here to kind of give you an idea of where both Lori and my Aunt Tina are. They're around the Hudson area, so you can see it's just north of Tampa Bay. But my Aunt Tina, you guys were dealing with Helene as well, and then now you're making your preparations for Milton. You guys lost power during Helene. Talk to us a little bit about what your experience was with Helene going through.
Well, we weren't expecting for where we live. Sorry, I'm going to get emotional, and I hate that. But anyway, we lost power for about 20 hours. Thank God we had a generator, which we were thinking to sell because everybody in our neighborhood said, we never lose power. And then, of course, we did. And I was like, wait a minute, you told me you didn't. So anyway, we hooked that up, and we were fine. We happen to be lucky because we're in Zone E. However, a lot of our friends were not. We have a lot of friends that were on the coast, and they lost everything.
Oh, I'm so sorry to hear that. And to give people a reference, when we're talking about zones, if you're not familiar with having to evacuate for hurricanes, you get Zone A, Zone B, Zone C, D, and E. And the higher the letter, the higher you are up, the less likely you are to get flooded. If you're Zone A or Zone B, you're likely going to be those first people that gets evacuated. Where I grew up in Florida, in Palm Harbor, we were right on the water, so we were always evacuated. Luckily, my aunt, she's E, so they were able to stay there, and the surge didn't actually reach them. But a lot of people weren't so lucky along the coast. And you were telling me earlier that you guys are making preparations. You have a couple of trees that you guys are getting cut down today.
Yep, they're doing it actually right now as we speak. That's the one part of where we live that I was concerned about is the trees, because they're not the healthiest trees that we have. And yesterday we saw a group of people come in, and they were cutting down 2 other trees from neighbors that are behind us. And I went, Mark, you better go over there and talk to them. So,
that's a good idea.
He did. And they said, oh, we'll come tomorrow. And we're like, great. So they're almost done, actually. They're very quick. It's like a well-oiled machine. And so we won't have that to worry about. We've got shutters that we have on the windows. We took care of those and secured them. And, we're pretty well set. We're probably going to leave tomorrow morning just because, in theory, we're supposed to go to a wedding on Saturday that's in Buffalo, New York. And so I guess it's kind of giving us an excuse to leave. Otherwise, we would probably just stay here. But I was watching the Weather Channel, and they're putting up tornado warnings for our area, too. So that's a whole another thing on top of all the wind and the rain that's going to be coming. And, you can have a super secure house, but, boy, you just take 1 or 2 things, and they can come through anything. And, I just don't want to be here for that. I know everybody down here is taking this storm extremely seriously. Everybody's leaving. Some people that I know, they're staying. But anybody that's in the zones, they actually just declared Zone Z or C as a mandatory leave. So, that is another group. And I have friends in Zone C that, they're like on the border of C and D, so I think they're going to stay. But, and I think a lot of it is a storm surge like Helene. Nobody anticipated that it was going to be as bad as it was.
I'm really glad that you're leaving. I'm glad that you're getting out, because this is not a system that you really want to risk it. And you were also mentioning that a lot of your neighbors that may have not taken other storms so seriously, they may not have put up those hurricane shutters. They're doing that now, because I know back when I was in high school, we had 2005, we had tons of storms, but it was like we would go and have hurricane parties because we just had tropical storms that went through. We didn't have anything like Milton that's coming. So I know when I was talking to you, you said people are taking this seriously. They're getting out, and I'm really happy to hear that. And you said, Antia, that you were going to wait until tomorrow because, just as Lori was saying, they were taking those trips. The roads are pretty clogged, which is great because people are getting out, but you're hoping that maybe tomorrow might be a little easier drive north for you.
That's what I'm hoping. I do have a friend that actually, they have an RV, and they made it up to Georgia, and they gave their route up to Georgia, and they said it was pretty easy, but they mostly took back roads. And I have a feeling that that's probably what we're going to end up doing, is doing the back roads to get up there so that we can avoid the main highway. We foolishly last night decided to go out to dinner with a bunch of people, and you talk about hurricane parties, and we said, oh, let's go out. And of course, you know, living in Newport Richey and going to Palm Harbor is where we ended up going. It took us, you know, maybe 30 minutes to get there, but it took us an hour and a half to get back because everybody was going up north. So I was like, oh, this is a taste of what we're going to have to deal with. Not looking forward to that.
Well, it's good that you guys were able to get out last night, because even if, you know, things are left standing, there's going to be significant power outages. It's going to take a long time to get that power back. So I'm really glad that you were able to get out and you're making those preparations for today. Thank you so much for talking with us, Antina. I'll definitely be checking in with you.
You're welcome. Have a great day.
Thank you. Yeah, so this system is definitely not like any of the others. I mean, just talking to the people that are in Florida right now, they can tell how serious the system is.
You know, when I was only there for 3 years, and we talked about evacuations, and of course, working in the news business, we were never expected, we would be expected to be at work. But our families, I don't recall, I guess we would have been in Zone A where I lived because it was on the water, but I don't recall the zones, as you mentioned, and your aunt is Zone E, but you said it's unusual for Zone C to be evacuated.
I mean, I haven't been there for a couple of years, but I know A, definitely, like anything's coming, A, you're out.
Yeah.
B, you know, if it's starting to look like it's serious, B, you're out. But to have C, that's pretty remarkable. In the house that I grew up in, I was talking to my mom, we're pretty close to the water. We weren't right on the water, so we were 3 feet above sea level. And then a lot of the houses are built on stilts, just so that when you get that storm surge, you can have the water that comes through. It takes out everything in the garage, but at least the house on top of that is left standing. And that was at 16 feet above sea level. And we're talking about a storm surge up to about 15 feet. So even at that, a lot of those houses on the stilts, you don't know if they're going to be left once Milton goes through. And then also my aunt was mentioning the tornadoes. I mean, that's another thing that you get. Once these start to hit land, they get more friction. You start to get some of that twisting. Granted, they're not the long track tornadoes that we get here. They're more EF0s or EF1s, but they still do damage. They still take roofs off. I mean, you definitely don't want to be outside in them. So this is a very serious situation.
Well, we will continue to track Hurricane Milton as it makes its way toward the U.S. We will update you on air and streaming on our website as well as on Pluto TV. Thank you very much for joining us.